briefer the better. That was very good. Thank you. It's good to be here at the new LACNIP Resource Center. This actually is a really wonderful meeting space, particularly in this weather. So it's good to be here. Tonight's what we call a city focus meeting, in which city staff, myself, city councilors are here to talk about current events and answer any questions that you might have. We moved this around from neighborhood to neighborhood. We learned a few years ago we used to have a meeting in City Hall and announce it, and nobody would show up. So we learned that we had to go where people already met. And so we appreciate being invited to this space, and look forward to sharing information on what's happening. I think we're going to start with Public Works Director Howard Elstro and go from there. Howard?
Thank you for having us this evening. Most of you know me. My name is Howard Elstro, Director of Public Works for the City of Lima. I'll tell you about two of our largest projects that we are constructing this year. The first one is reconstruction of two of the streets in our downtown, Elizabeth and West, from Elm to North Street. They will be refashioned in the streetscape setting of Main Street, and some of the other streets downtown already are. This project is going to be about $1.3, $1.4 million. Most of these dollars are not local dollars that Lima puts in. We do match using some of our community development block grant allocation. Most of these funds are leveraged and are federal and state in source. They are set aside for projects of reconstruction like this. We will have new sidewalks, curbs, do some base work. There will be trees and lighting, and it will be very beautiful, like Market and Main Street are currently. Our other largest project that we have underway already is the Market Street Bell Fountain Corridor project. It begins to the east at Bell Fountain and Kibbe and continues down Bell Fountain and then westwardly on Market Street to Woodlawn. With this project, we are putting in decorated lights. Those intersections that do not have the large mast arm signals, heads and signals, poles, will be changed out. We will do some selective curb work, some selective sidewalk where the sidewalk is failing, and do tree plantings along that entire distance. This project totals about 1.7, and it too is primarily federal and state funds. Might be of interest to understand that when we do a project, it's typically more than 3, typically about 5 years in the planning stage. That's how long it takes for us to do the design, submit all of the plans to the various state agencies, compete for these grants, make our case of why these federal funds should be spent in our community. There's environmental checks that have to be done on the duration of the scope of the project. And there's an awful lot of minutia that must be met to satisfactorily use these federal funds. I will talk about the lighting. This is the decorative lighting that we already have in the central portion of the city. And I know since we are with you in this neighborhood, primarily people on the West End, I know the mayor had fielded some phone calls immediately after we started asking how far west we are going with this project. And the answer is we're stopping at Woodlawn. The Boulevard area has lighting which is leased from AEP. And the question was, can we continue that further west? Well, it comes down to dollars and cents and how many dollars we think we can actually negotiate and leverage for a particular project. In the case of that next stretch of Market Street, which I will not argue, it would be great for us to take that off of AEP's grid, put in the decorative lights, which we use nothing but energy-saving lights. We use, forget the term already, LED light-emitting diodes, which use just a mere fraction of the wattage and kilowatts that normal street lights do. So there would be an energy saving if we put this on our own circuit, but that means we must put our new wiring poles and the lighting fixtures in, and the cost for Woodlawn to the corporate limit is $500,000, about $509,000. So that's going to have to be a next phase down the line at some point. We were blessed about 30 years ago with block grant funds, and most of the lighting grid on the south and east portions of the city are on the City of Lima grid. Those were paid for with community development block grant funds some 30, 35 years ago. And we just did a LED conversion of those over the past about 3 years. So we've really lowered our energy consumption and consequently the cost of energy that we pay for street lighting by upgrading to these energy efficient lights. That's all I have. If there's questions, I'll be more than glad to try to answer.
Are the traffic lights LED, Jim?
Yes, the question was, are the traffic signals also LED lit? Yes, they are LED bulbs. I think we switched those over probably about 4 and 5 years ago. So really everything we have out there is pretty much switched over. We have also switched over the buildings, the Hall of Justice, the municipal building, central service and the fire stations are all now energy efficient lighting. It might be of interest, we had done a lot of this with what they call RZ bond money, which came from the American Reinvestment Act, the stimulus dollars that were made available to various communities after the economic crisis of 2008. So we were very proactive with the direction from the mayor to go after stimulus funds. And one of these very large projects that we did was redoing all of our lighting systems. We're just now finishing up just a few more portions in the various parks. Most of the parks have already switched over to LEDs. We have the equipment bought and our crews install that ourselves as time permits. So everything's bought and almost completely LED now. Any other questions?
Is there rhyme or reason of where the light posts are going? There doesn't seem to be
Yes.
scattered.
The question is the lighting, the poles down and up and down Market Street, why are they there? A couple different reasons. We have to meet lighting guidelines put forth by the Ohio Department of Transportation and Federal Highway because those are the source of funds that we're using. So they have to be a certain distance to cast particular luminary or candle power lights on the sidewalks and the streets. And that's part of the spacing. The other spacing might be because we're trying to miss somebody's driveway and such. So it won't be perfectly uniform, but that's with the differential that you see. Anything else? Thank you for having me this evening.
If you look up, you can see some of the energy efficient light. Because all this was switched out before. Yeah, these are the small tubes, and they are so LACNIP will benefit, because they're paying the electric bill from the fact that these were all installed recently. So, our Utilities Director, Gary Shealy's here. Comments about activities in the utilities department.
Normally, Mike Caprella, the deputy director, is also here, but Mike unfortunately had a death in the family, and his mother was funeral was today, so Mike's with that. So I guess you'll get to hear me talk about the water, wastewater, and garbage and refuse, all the things that we have disciplined in. Water system, the carbon process is on board now. It literally ensures that we can meet some of the upcoming and current regulations. It's literally a big Brita filter is the best way, as I've heard Mike describe it. So it also helps with taste and odor, so we hope that any of those type of issues we've had in the past, because we have up-ground reservoirs that can grow algae, those type of things, this system here will more than adequately treat that. A couple other areas in the water system, we are working with the village of Caro, and basically getting the water system up there. The piping basically is there. And we are looking at putting in a meter reading system in that community that literally we currently have meters that we read by just driving a vehicle down the street. And basically we have a computer that is in there that has a radio receiver, and all the meters in the city basically have a little transmitter, either sets in a little tile that you see out in your front yard, or it's a wire down the basement. And we pick the readings up there. We are pilot testing in Caro, though, a system that's called a mass system to allow us to actually get the meter readings from a pole, you know, the water tower out there, something of this nature, and then it transmits those signals back. And one of the reasons why we're doing that, of course, it saves our manpower for other areas, and as we expand the system, it keeps us from having to basically increase our meter readings. But the real advantage of this is that this is what's called smart meter reading technology. And if a resident out there, as an example, would get a leak in the water, a lot of water be going through their meters. Right now, it takes us 30 days before we realize that, because that's when we get the readings. Under the smart reading technology, it'll literally send that back overnight to our offices, where we can basically respond to the resident, let them know something's going on in the system. At points in times, we have people also that we turn the water off because they didn't pay their bill, and guess what? They go out there and they turn it back on, and then turn it off, put it back on. This system here, even though they can still do that, but we'll know the instant that they basically turn the water off. So we really believe that it improves our efficiency, but as much as anything, it's going to enable a whole greater level of customer service to our customers. A person can come into our customer service office, they can say, I'm moving out, they need a meter reading, they can get that meter reading instantly, just by basically putting in the account number or the address. So this is something we're pilot testing. Whether it goes throughout the whole system, over time will be based upon the results of that water system, or the pilot study that we're doing. Just briefly, in the sewer side, we're continuing to negotiate with US EPA. The Clean Water Act requirements that the community has to meet are combined sewer overflows, sanitary sewer overflows. Dealing with our wet weather. It's all rain. During dry weather, everything's fine. When it rains, we have to meet these new regulations. We believe that we're technically at agreement with what we have to build in the system, which is approximately $150 million worth of projects over the next 28 years. Where we are currently, though, is negotiating with the agency on what's called the consent decree. It's a legal binding document that basically will obligate the city to do these projects, spend the money, get in the best compliance we can with the Clean Water Act. But that consent decree also has some stipulations that we're basically saying the agency has this new plan called integrated planning. They finally realized that their policies as they were applying was going to bankrupt communities. And they're very active in the Conference of Mayors. We're basically teaming up with most cities that have combined sewer overflows and issues like that around Ohio, let alone in the eastern part of the United States where most of them are. And the agency is saying, well, they're going to use this integrated plan. They're going to consider all of our obligations. They'll allow us to prioritize our systems, and they're going to ensure that there is a better affordability capacity to do these projects. And we're still challenging them both directly with the agency in negotiations. We're also basically dealing with our congressman, saying maybe there's some changes to the Clean Water Act. The law was passed in 1972 is basically driving all this. So currently, today, as part of that process, late last year we got our NPDES permit, which is a permit that allows us to discharge to the Ottawa River. We're designing upwards of $30 million worth of projects that are associated with improvements at the plant and being able to treat the high rate flows when it rains at the facility. And then eventually, per our plan, you'll see the Simmons Field basin being done. But that's all based upon affordability. We're basically telling the agency certain things has to happen in the community. The wealth in the community needs to be sustained to basically and improved to basically undertake these projects. Otherwise, we have to relook at the projects, possibly put them off for a time, or modify them so they're not quite as expensive. So a lot of this stuff is still not fully clear in our minds yet, but it is something that we're going to basically be working on a number of years in the future. The other thing I will point out, this is the next realm of issues that we're dealing with. It's called the TMDL. It's the total maximum daily load, what the Ottawa River can assimilate from this community. Farmers, residential, businesses. This becomes a directive issue that the community is going to be dealing with probably over the next 40 to 50 years as this thing goes. And we are looking at phosphorus. I mean, all of us like to put fertilizer at point times on our yards and so forth like that. Anybody seen the paper what Scott's is doing now? Scott's Lawn? They're basically, they're turf builder. They're eliminating the phosphate from the fertilizer. Because one of the areas that happens is when you put it on your yard, a percentage of that ends up making it to the stream. So it's all these type of things that basically we're going to be dealing with. But for Lima, it's an ultra low level of phosphates that we'll have to meet. If this thing stands as they have projected right now, and it has serious, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential expense the community may have to face. And this is why this integrated plan that the agency is advocating and we're pushing for will be very, very important as we move into the future. Because we can't keep piling more expense onto the community because the regulations say we have to meet these type of issues. And I guess the last thing I'll have in the garbage and refuse, about a year from now we'll be rebidding our contract. It's a 5-year contract. We're in the 4th year of it now, next year. So probably about this time next year we'll be bidding. So if you have ideas as to what you'd like to see improvements in how the garbage and refuse service works, feel free to send me a letter, send council a letter, and basically addressing what you may feel would be a better way to do things. Because we'll write those specifications over the winter, and by this time we'll be out for bid next year. And so more lead time the better to start this. We'll have probably a lot of conversations with the Utilities Committee of Council and setting all these things up, so stay tuned. Any other questions?
Is the water or the sewage usage go up here recently?
The sewer bill has the water rate basically has been in place now for over a year. And the sewer rate, basically, though, we adjusted it last spring. And if you recall, when we discussed, we're moving to a flat bill. In other words, basically what's going to happen is right now, or what's been in the past, your sewer's been based upon the amount of consumption. The amount of water you use is what costs your sewer. And what basically is taking place now is we have moved to a flat rate. And ultimately, 9 years down the line, that flat rate for both inside and outside will be $50 a month. And that's the targeted cost that'll take us to fund that $150 million worth of projects over the 28-year, actually it goes out probably 60 years by the time we put all the debt service in. But right now, each year, I can tell you, each year for the next 28 years, there's going to be a sewer rate increase each year. It has to happen basically to provide that level of funding that's necessary to meet these obligations.
There's more people living in Lima.
Well, the thing I can tell you is that the $50 a month, the county right now is at $45 a month. That's what their flat rate bill is. We're paralleling what the county is. They eventually will be at $50 by their projects they have to do, and we're basically trying to ensure that the Lima residents and the township residents who are served by their system, we are equitable in that rate structure throughout our community. Now, somebody can always go out in the middle of nowhere and build a house, but, you know, I can tell you that the sewer rules, the regulations are going to probably require most locations to be on a public sewer system. That's the reality. Other questions? Tom?
Well, if you haven't mentioned it, the issue of the $50 a month, if we lost the ratepayers outside the city that are currently on our system, what would our bill go up to in the city?
It would be probably approaching $150 to $200 per household.
So it was very important that we come to an agreement to flatten the rate out for inside the city and outside the city, so we don't lose those thousands of people outside the city who are helping fund our sewer system. Because the county has the option to take those over. So it was good cooperation between the county and the city to make this happen and prevent the city residents from facing those huge increases.
I can tell you there is a lot of discussion on affordability right now. Federal EPA uses 2% of median household income as their number, which is for us, where our median household income for the community is $50 a month. But if you got somebody that makes $15,000 a year, that's 8, 9, 10% of their income. And so a lot of discussions are occurring as to, you know, frank with you, Congress needs to step up like they did back in the 70s and provide some funding and relief to communities. Otherwise, our only alternative is to basically put it on the backs of the ratepayer. And that's where it gets real tricky. So, you know, stay tuned. Other questions?
Thank you, Gary. We also have the chief of police here, but his wife's here as well. So I didn't know. Anybody want to vote on who should speak?
All right. Actually, I'm a little nervous about being up here speaking anyway with Mr. Sherlow and Mr. Black in here. I'm scared to death they're going to fail me and make me do this all over again. Last week was a great week for the community, I believe, because it was a very bad week for the criminals within our community. As most of you may have heard by now, for 2 days last week, the Lima Police Department worked along with the Ohio State Highway Patrol, the Allen County Sheriff's Department, Delphus Police Department, Shawnee Township Police Department, and Lima Police Department, in an initiative that is spearheaded by the Ohio State Highway Patrol called Operation Shield. And the purpose is quite simple. We look for where the high crime and high traffic crash rate areas are within the county, within the city, and we put a lot of police officers out there to take enforcement action for whatever they may see. They are targeting primarily traffic violations. Now, from those traffic violations, then when the officers make those stops, they will then use good old-fashioned police work to try to build bigger cases off there if the people that are in those cars are up to something bigger than just maybe forgetting to use the turn signal. But to give you an idea as to what some of the numbers are that we had, there were a total of 792 traffic stops made in those 2 days. When I say 2 days, it was on Tuesday and Friday of last week. 12 hours each for each of those 2 days. It was 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Tuesday, and then 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. on Friday night and Saturday morning. And out of those two 12-hour blocks of time, there's a total of 792 traffic stops made by the officers that were working on this detail. And of that, they issued 206 citations, 8 of which were for OVIs, and 31 of which were for driving under suspensions. And a lot of people might say, well, you know, you're really doing much to make me safer or to make my life better if you're out there arresting people that drive under suspension. Well, something you need to realize is with people who are driving under suspension, the overwhelming majority of the time, people that do not have driver's licenses also do not have insurance. So if they were to have a car crash, their fault involving you, you still get stuck footing the bill. So I think that is a very big violation. There was also then an additional 585 warning tags issued. That was for people who were basically doing everything else right. Maybe they forgot to use their turn signal or some other type of minor violation like that. It still brings awareness to them so that they will hopefully then be more careful in the way that they drive going away from that stop. But at the same time, it's not creating any unnecessary expense or burden or inconvenience on them. We had a total of 11 felony arrests made as a result of the operation. 10 of those were on felony drug charges. We had 37 misdemeanor arrests, of which 22 of those were misdemeanor drug charges. And then we had an additional 19 arrest warrants served. So again, people that had already previously filed charges on cases in which they were the victim of that type of thing are going to be able to see their cases and be able to go forward in court now that we've been able to find the subjects of the arrest warrants. We had one illegal gun removed from the streets, and I realize that there's probably a lot more out there, but again, we have to follow our constitutional guidelines when we make the stops and as we proceed with these, but we were still able to get one illegal gun off the street. Something that I think is very unique, I've never heard of this happening on a traffic stop before. One stop actually involved officers being able to find $400 in counterfeit currency. And along with that, they also seized some ecstasy in that same traffic stop. And then probably the biggest one, the one that I think if nothing else would have happened, the one that would have made this all worthwhile, was there was one juvenile who was victim of human trafficking that was rescued. So, again, someone that does not have to, her family does not have to face the same type of situations what families have faced in Cleveland, or certainly more tragic than that, even as we've seen in some cases. This young lady's been rescued. She's been able to be returned home. Been getting a lot of inquiries wanting more information on that particular case, which we cannot give because, again, the whole case has been turned over to the Federal Human Trafficking Task Force, of which we do have an officer involved in that task force. But so the case has been turned over to them. They're going to be investigating the same. And I would really be at best just guessing if I tried to guess exactly where that case may lead. Hopefully it will lead to rescuing other victims. So again, that's something that could have some really big positive impacts for a lot of people. Something else that's going on at the police department, as always, when you have an organization as big as the police department, there seems to be constant flux or change in the personnel. Many of you may have known Detective Joe Nolan. He just recently retired. So with him retiring, he will be getting replaced here by one of our juvenile officers, Bob Stu, who is the next up on the promotional list to be promoted to detective. In which case, once he's promoted, then we will also have to choose someone from the line to replace Officer Stu as a juvenile officer. But rather than just leaving a vacancy there, the mayor has actually already approved our being allowed to replace Officer Nolan. So we are very fortunate right now. We happen to have a working list. And not only do we have a working list, but that working list actually has everyone's background checks done and all of the interviews done. So actually, we already knew who the next most qualified person was on the list to be hired. So we're going to be, hopefully this week yet, getting out a conditional offer of employment for that person so that they can then begin the process of getting their computerized voice stress analysis test done. Then they will have a psychological examination, upon successful completion of that. Then they will have a medical exam with a drug screen. When all three of those items are completed, the person will then be appointed by the mayor to the police department. I will also say that this next individual that's up on the list actually already has his peace officer certification, so we will be able to immediately get him into the field training program. Okay, there'll still be 26 weeks total from the time we start before he'll actually be able to be out counted on his own. But at least again, it puts us a lot better ahead of the time curve on this one than what we normally are. We would have to request a test and go through the entire civil service process. So we're actually, the timing was very good on this one for us. We also then, for anyone that may not be aware, we do still have 2 officers that are currently in the police academy at the High State Highway Patrol of Columbus. Their anticipated graduation date is going to be next month in June, and then once they get back, then again we will be able to get them also right away into the field training program and start getting to this next portion of the training. So that is actually everything that I had to pass on. Is there anybody that has any questions about it?
Can you tell us what old the grow was that was rescued?
Again, we're not releasing any more information on that right now because, again,
I understand.
not sure where the investigation can lead, and we've got to make sure we maintain the integrity of the information. Reverend Horton?
Yes, Chief. Over the denomination of the conflict.
Denominations. Actually, I can tell you that. It was two $100 bills, and the rest were 20s.
Okay. I know because a lot of 20s are floating around.
Yeah. I actually knew that one right off the top of my head. And again, I'll tell you, that was a very unique case. I cannot ever recall anyone recovering counterfeit money in a traffic stop. Usually it's when somebody's trying to pass it. So again, it was actually a case of very good heads-up police work on the part of the officers. Any other questions? Well, Mayor, I'm going to sit down.
Very good. And Amy Odom's here from the Department of Community Development with an update on code enforcement, I'm sure, and all kinds of spring-related stuff.
Let's just all take a deep breath, shall we? Isn't this the most beautiful setting we've had for a city focus in years? And it's a wonderful opportunity. The last city focus, and I think I'm going to keep saying it, we're the Department of Community Development, but I really think we should change the name to the Department of Community Partnership. Because you're sitting in a facility that, through the auspices of the fire department, chief is not here, okay, and with assistance from our neighborhood support program, LACNIP was able to acquire this building and make this available to the community at large. So, I mean, that's just one of the examples of community partnership that the Department of Community Development actually is involved with. We run actually 6 different distinct programs out of the department. We manage about $17 million in grant funds, but they don't stay in our department. They actually go out to help match other funds that are brought in by other departments to increase the value of those funds. Our job, and you're sick of me saying it, Amy's job is to make sure I don't go to jail and no one else does. My job is when we receive those funds that we do the reporting correctly, the funds are used appropriately, and we try to get the biggest bang for the buck. We try to make sure that they're used in such a way that we can bring as many dollars as possible into the community. A couple things that we have going on right now, which the mayor had mentioned, is obviously it is our code enforcement season. We started this week doing our specified parcel program. There are over 500 lots that are cut once a month by the city of Lima that are vacant and abandoned. We would like to encourage you that if you are aware of those lots and you would like to acquire them, please let us know, because we can then move into another one of our programs, which is called land banking. And if the properties are tax delinquent, we may be able to work with you and the county auditor's office and treasurer's office to make those available to you for $250 or slightly more, depending on the size of the lot. But those are available to you, and we'd like to see them go to a good home. We'd like to see them go to someone who may want to expand their lot or to do some building to bring more homes into the city of Lima. In terms of cutting grass, dealing with trash, board-ups, and junk autos, it's also been very busy. The Community Development Committee, led by Councilperson Teresa Adams, and also Councilperson Tebben has been very involved with, are focusing on junk autos currently. We're trying to find a way, in partnership with the police department, to remove as many as possible as we can within the next few months. This is something that has been a shared responsibility with the Department of Community Development and the police department, and we're trying to find a way to do that more effectively. Most people don't know that, by the way, if someone has gifted you with a junk vehicle on your property, just call the city. If it's been left on your property for more than 24 hours, you can sign a slip and we can have it removed for you for free. There is no reason a landlord should tell you, well, I can't get rid of these vehicles because they've been left with me. They can be removed. Additionally, there are problems such as parking in front lawns, other kinds of vehicle-related issues that we have to partner with the police department with, and we'll continue to address this summer. The other large project we're currently engaged with is going back to that money issue that we manage. Department of Community Development is probably best known for applying for holding public hearings and administering federal funds, community development block grant funds, and home dollars. We are right in the middle of our annual community development block grant fund public hearing series. We had one, I believe, 2 weeks ago to kick off the series, explaining what we've done with the funds and how they can be used in the future. And I had to give a little bad news. So I'm going to continue to share that bad news so people understand where we're at. And I always have to grab my numbers because I'm never really clear on them until I have them in hand. Bottom line, folks, is that you probably heard about something called sequestration. Sequestration is what's occurring with the federal government right now, where they're basically they are reducing federal funds across the board, 5% across the board in all programs. So we will be receiving a 5% decrease in our home funds, which are used for low to moderate income housing development, and also in our CDBG funds. That poses a problem, but even a greater problem is the City of Lima's CDBG funding has continued to decrease. And if you would track it since 2005, we have received a steady decline in funds to we're about, I would say about 30 to 35% less than we received in the past, meaning in the new funds. Additionally, carryover funds, funds that we've been able to save and conserve and bring forward, because the new funds have decreased, we've whittled down those carryover funds at a much, much more rapid rate. So the bottom line is the actual decrease in funds that we will have available for CDBG and home funds this year is about $933,000, almost $1 million less, give or take, than we have had in the past to use for projects in the city of Lima. CDBG funds are used very extensively by Mr. Elstro's department to match dollars that come in for streets. They're used extensively for match for our demolition programs as well, and for other kinds of funding. So it's not only the decrease in the federal funds, we will probably experience in our ability to match other dollars as well. So much for the bad news. The good news is, as I stated earlier, we view ourselves as the Department of Partnership. And we have been able to go out and find other partners to help make up for the reduction in some of those funds. And again, I want to give kudos to Mr. Elstro's department on the increase in demolition that they've been doing over the last couple of years. I don't know if you've noticed it in this neighborhood, but actually I think there were 2 or 3 homes taken down just around the corner. Those funds were not CDBG funds because those have decreased so dramatically. What those funds were NSP funds, which are Neighborhood Stabilization Program funds that we competed for. Normally, we don't have a relationship with the state of Ohio, but we were very fortunate to be included in their grants to bring over 220 demolitions into the city over the last 2 years. We are now administering another state pot of monies, which come from the Attorney General's office, which are called Moving Ohio Forward funds. We've taken down about, Mr. Elster reported at the last council meeting, about 45, I believe. We're going to be getting another bunch of money, which should take us to another 40. And hopefully, if we get all these funds expended by the end of the year, according to their rules, basically if we expend it all, get it all done, we can then go back next year and ask for additional funds. These are new partnerships. These are folks, departments that we've not worked with in the past, but we're able to bring those dollars in, and we're pleased that the partnership has made a difference in the city of Lima. Weeds and trash grass, really quickly, I'm sure you're all used to me talking about that. The bottom line is, as I've always said I'm going to get 2 tattoos. One that says, I don't do demos, because that's Mr. Elstro's department. And the other one is going to be 8 inches up my leg, because that's how high your grass can be. So it'll be much easier for me when we're out doing inspections that I can just look at the line that's left at my ankle. We do over 4,000 inspections a year. We only have we have Angie Rex, Krista Sprouse, Pete White, and part-time we have one other inspector, Chase Falke, who does both our housing programs and our PM. So those 3.5 people manage over 4,000 inspections each year. If you do have problems with weeds, trash, grass, open buildings, board ups, please do give our offices a call, and we'd be happy to send them out to do what we can to take care of that problem. But the season is on us with all those activities, and I want to invite you all to participate. to become active in your neighborhood cleanups, to become active in our hearings, and to become active in your neighborhood associations, because the neighborhood associations actually contribute over $850,000 each year in volunteer hours and activity, meaning that simply by your getting out and assisting in those projects, you're saving your community that amount of money for paid services. And I want to thank each and every one of you for even being here tonight, because I'm expecting you to do your service by taking this information out and sharing it with your neighborhood. So thanks. And if you do have any questions about any of the programs I mentioned, please do give our office a call. Thanks. Yes.
Once you have your angle 8 inches,
Yes, sir.
what's the next step you do for the if people don't cut their grass?
If they don't cut the grass, they receive a notice. If they don't do it, we send someone out to cut it. It's very expensive to you as taxpayers, by the way, because if they don't take care of it yourself, it costs over $500 to have an inspector go out several times to do the legal research, to supervise staff that goes out to actually contractors that go out to do the cutting. So if they don't cut it, we go out and do it for them. If they don't pay us, they don't pay you, the taxpayers. It goes on their property taxes.
Okay, now the line on its way, I understand it's over 64% rental. That's why we have so much trouble. They don't take care of them houses.
Well, you know what's real? That's an interesting point, Mr. Chili, because when you look at the breakout of the work that the Department of Community does, the majority of the work is actually not rental, it's vacant and abandoned properties. No one in them. And it's because the city was built for 53,000 people. Currently, we have 36.
Why?
Well, we can talk about the history of Lima and the decline of the industrial age, but the bottom line is that
I don't have the history of Lima,
Yeah.
but I noticed one thing.
Yeah.
Me personally. Okay, I fixed my house, my tax triple. Okay, you're a slob, you get a grant. Why? Why you punish the people that try to improve the area?
Actually, we do try to reward the people that improve the area because there are incentives that are available for you too, and I'd be glad to talk to you about them.
That's
the
good.
other thing that we do,
Good.
is that
I
we
need
also
some-
do our
I need
economic
some
development
knowledge.
incentives. Any other questions?
How long did property have to be taxed delinquent?
Property has to be certified delinquent by the county, and they wait 2 years before they can certify it. And then one,
My wife is 2 foot tall by now.
yeah. Okay, we can work something out, value the property. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. To your point about fixing up houses, actually, if you make improvements to your property, we have actually across the city tax abatement available for property owners that make those improvements.
Well, that's what happened, is I was not knowledgeable, so when I extended my house to rebuild, and I thought it was a section at a time, I said, well, about $10,000. Well, I spent about $200,000, they got my abatement for $10,000, which will expire in 2015. So then I went back, I said, wait a minute, oh no, we can't change it. So my old house is $10,000. My appraisal, they have $150,000. There's no house in that neighborhood to sell for $150,000. You know, 2 and 2 doesn't add up. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know legal like now. This piece of paper, I'm trying to get variance for my garage. Okay, I gotta get them neighbor around my, get this variance. And I asked the neighbor, did I bother anybody? Because I had my family live there, ran into some financial problem. And I had 3 slobs in the neighborhood. When I went for variance last time, they complained. But I didn't know that was the proper procedure. So I'm living and learning, but it's costing me a heck of a dollar. And which, when you're on Social Security like myself, I do work. Thank God, even though I'm 72, my dollars don't go up. I'm trying to figure out why can the state and federal government live according to their means? Like, yes, the silver line has to be fixed. I could understand it. But, for example, I was bid on a job in Oak Glaze County. It's prevail wages. At plumber, I think it's $51 with benefits, everything. Well, I'm doing it for 20. So you see a different plumber that I am? It's a lot of discrepancies I have, so there's no way we're going to straighten it out. But, 2 and 2 doesn't make 4. Why I have to go all these troubles before I go out.
Rick Stolley is here from our Parks Department to talk about the spring activities and think he's just coming from ball games right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
That's pretty good.
Please excuse my attire. Usually I'm not this casual, but 3 games tonight, and we got all 3 of them. But the last one being played at Frozen, which brings me to the point where we got an awful lot of young men and women out playing in our parks. It's always good to get out this time of year and get involved. And part of what we do in the recreation department is volunteer, and evenings with volunteering and coaching and getting involved with some of our youth programming. So parks are full. Our baseball and softball programs are underway. We are in the process of doing our sign-ups for the playground program, which will begin the 10th of June. We started this week getting back over to Schoonover Pool to get the pool open, and this will be the 73rd year of Schoonover Pool. So each year gets a little more of a challenge for us to kind of wake her up after the winter and get her going again. But the guys are out there getting things cleaned up. We'll be painting portions of the pool again this year and getting things ready to go with that. And the date for the pool is the 8th of June, Saturday, the 8th of June. The pool will open up. So we've been busy planning this winter for all these activities. One thing we didn't plan on this year that we should have after last spring was 6.5 inches of rain in April.
Yeah.
And with that challenge, we've been out really attacking the parks and trying to get the areas that we normally take care of down, mowed, and so forth. And right now our focus is to do the maintenance and of the parks, and we'll be back to manicure them and get them where everyone enjoys them with our weed whipping and getting all the little fine things that need to happen. We'll be getting that done here as we get caught up with our mowing rotation. And we've got an awful lot of seasonals starting to come in for our recreation programming with the playground program, and some of our ball diamond crew and some of our seasonal folks are getting out of college now to come in and start helping us with some of those chores with the maintenance in the parks. While we're doing all that, we're still out there trying to take care of the things that pop up each and every day. The little fires that we need to put out from time to time, whether it be a restroom going down or an issue with a backstop here, there, or where that needs to be repaired. But it's a lot of land, like 400 acres of land that we maintain or we're responsible for, and couldn't do it without a great crew, serious staff of dedicated individuals that step up and make it happen. So we've got some great partnerships that we continue to maintain over the years with some of those chores that we do, and so we continue to work very closely with those folks. Just a couple weeks ago, the Northside Neighborhood Association helped us with funding paint to do part of the fence along Robb Avenue with kids from Temple Christian schools that came out and spent a day working with us and sprucing that up, and all the work that they do with Robb Park, and Forest Park United Methodist does a great job at Lincoln with us and kind of adopt the park for some maintenance things and manicuring things we couldn't normally get to. Splash pad will be opening up here in Froden in the next couple weeks. We had it open. We had some issues with, we're not sure if lightning hit the cabinet or what, but we got some parts coming in to get that fixed. So our goal is we want to get it up and get it run and tested before the Memorial Day when we thought we had it, but a couple issues with that. But other than that, Mayor, we're welcoming folks back to the park, and we're looking forward to getting to another terrific summer of recreational activities and just coming out and enjoying the green spaces that LACNIP has to offer for the community. So thank you. Thank you. And Steve Cleaves, the city's finance director, is here. Normally he's Mr. Doom and Gloom, but things have been looking up a little bit in the city finances. So what do you got to report, Steve?
Well, we're going to have a report on our general fund budget this coming Monday at the City Council in front of the finance group. Actually, the city's finances are in a pretty good shape. This review on Monday will be a general fund, but I'll just mention we had Mr. Shealy talking about the water and sewer fund. I just want to highlight that those are what we call a business or an enterprise fund. Those funds are self-financed through your rate structure. So your rates fluctuate depending on the actual cost of running those businesses. General fund, however, requires tax revenue primarily to fund the city operations. That would be fire and police and all the other individuals, the street work and such. Our budget process that we're going to be reviewing Monday for the general fund, we actually started our budget last September. We had the mayor's estimate submitted in December. We had hearings in January. The budget was approved in late February. And since that time, we've been tracking things fairly closely. The city of Lima actually has what I call an active, flexible budget. I personally review it every month, and about every 3 or 4 months, I'll review the status with City Council, because we need to make adjustments as we move along, because as the facts change, your plans have to change. We don't lock ourselves into something and then go blindly ahead for the next 12 months and hope it all turns out okay. But we are doing well now. We have a cash reserve of about 30% of our spending, which is really first class in the public sector. There isn't any other city in the region who is near that. There used to be a lot of cities like that before 2008, but they've mostly been hit with layoffs and furloughs and service cuts. We haven't had to do that. Again, we're in fairly good shape, but we are facing additional funding requirements in the general fund. You heard Ms. Odom and Mr. Alsgrove refer to their projects in the matching funds. We also heard that the federal government is cutting back on those funds. But we still have to come up with those matches. For instance, on the housing demolition fund, there's an item on the agenda for Monday's council to approve $111,000 matching for those demolitions. The state's going to give us $111,000. We got to come up with a match. That's coming out of the general fund. We didn't do that before because there were generally other grants and resources where we could basically run the entire grant program on matches from one grant or the other. But those days are coming to an end. If we're going to maintain that service level, the general fund is going to have to step up and match some of those grants, which is a good thing to do because you get $2, $3, or $4 for every dollar that you match. And we just can't afford to bypass on that opportunity. As long as we can afford it, we've got to make sure that we can continue to afford it. And that's what we're doing. We'll also be looking at our capital requirements on Monday. We've been very conservative with our capital spending for several years. It's basically been, if it's not broken and can't be fixed, don't replace it. But you can only do that for a certain period of time, and you really have to start replacing old equipment. And we've been doing that in the last few years, and we're ramping up. We purchased a fire truck, 2 fire trucks in the past. We're going to purchase another one this year. We purchased ambulances. We begin buying 3 or 4 cruisers every year. And we need to keep doing that. We've got a major capital requirement for some backup in the data processing area. We need a backup server room. There's one in the utilities department. But if a tornado or something comes through, we'll put the city out of business, basically. So we're going to build a backup in the police department. That's going to cost us in excess of $1 million. So we've got to step up and fund that. And so we have a series of ongoing capital requirements, and we also have the need to continue to pursue grants very aggressively and have the funds to be able to accept those grants. There are a lot of cities now who refuse grants because they can't come up with the money match. We don't want to find ourselves in that kind of a situation. But the city's finances are strong, and they look to be strong, you know, for the coming years if we just keep managing the way we have for the past 10 years at least. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We do have two city council representatives here. Ms. Adams from the fifth ward. I always want to say third ward. Teresa, you have any comments?
No, thank you.
And Tom Tebben from the fourth ward. Tom?
Yeah, I do have comments.
All right.
I want to apologize. I was a few minutes late. I had 2 meetings scheduled at 7 o'clock. That doesn't work out for a while. But my other meeting was on the other side of town. I was up by I-75. And just driving through the city, you know, you get excited. When I came down Spring Street, and I took Spring Street just all the way out. And all the infrastructure that the city has invested in these last number of years, it's really paying dividends, and the city is looking better. I look at this facility and what we've done. Was it easy to shut down a fire department? No. But this is some good that's come out of it. I look at the house, it's right on the other side of that brick house, first house. That's the house that was torn down. And the neighbors have been asking for a long time for that house to be gone. It is a real process to get to the point that you can take a house down. It's not something the city enjoys doing, but for the quality of life for the people around here, what a beautiful setting. And while we were sitting here listening, I heard some little kid coming down the street bouncing a basketball. I mean, it's just really neat to see. A couple of the things going on that I'm working on. The Elm Street reconstruction from Woodlawn to Cable, there is still a concern about the amount of truck traffic that is going past Woodlawn. We have a baseline count of what the truck traffic was before the reconstruction. And I don't know if you saw the pads out recently, but they're taking more traffic counts, and we're going to look at that data, and there is a plan long-term to deal with it. But it's a citywide plan, and we may have to pull some things up. The problem that I think we're running into is, and Jim Carter called me up and said, Jim Carter called me up and we talked about it, and it was like, I can't believe that it was missed, but I really think it was missed. There were two separate projects going on. The Woodlawn to Cable was one, but then the conversion to two-way streets on Elm, all the way out, gave you a straight shot from the interstate to East Town Road. Well, when you get to St. Charles, that's not reconstructed. It's not meant for that kind of traffic. And it will cause issues. So we're aware of it. We're looking at it. We want to get the data and make some decisions on how to deal with it. The junk autos were mentioned earlier, and Teresa Adams is the chair of the committee. We're working together on this, along with Amy and Kevin. I have made it a priority, personal priority this year, to clean this city up, all the wards for junk autos. I love to take bike rides. I love to take bike rides, and I go around the 4th Ward, and I can show you 50 junk autos in the 4th Ward. That is unacceptable. We have set our standards here relative to junk autos. We need to raise them up to here. It just blows my mind personally when I see this, and I receive phone calls on it. But to see this, and I'm wondering, what are these people holding on to these vehicles for? With the price of scrap metal, they could get some money for it. But why should their neighbors have to look at it? And Teresa Adams and I were talking. She went to a house the other day. How many did you see initially?
I saw 3 initially,
Saw 3 initially, turned it in. They did an investigation, and there were
4 more in the back.
7 vehicles. We have a property over on Lakewood with 7 vehicles. Yeah, I mean, it's an issue that I think, if you look at it, so what did we have in the way of resources, or what currently do we have? In the police department, we have part of a police officer. Amy gave you the statistics for the Department of Community Development for how many calls they handle on a yearly basis now. We have to fund this. City Council is serious about it. We're pulling the numbers together. The administrators need the resources to get it done. It's our job as City Council members to prioritize that spending and supply that funding. But I think that would be to provide the seed money. This program needs to fund itself. And I believe that the people who are consuming these services need to pay that money, not the taxpayers. So we're working to put together a process that will accomplish that. One question I had for the group tonight, in the ward and just in the area in general, is the Dominion East Ohio Gas and all the line replacement. What kind of, I have not, I've received 1 phone call for a question, and when I went to vote last week, lady said, "Have you received many calls?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, let me be your first complaint." I said, "Well, can I vote first?" So I came back and talked to her, but what has the experience been?
Not good.
Yours was not good?
Not good. They destroyed our yard and left pipes standing up in the yard. I called them and said, "Well, we're not going to fix that until the spring. The spring rolled along." And he said, "Your grass should be growing by now." And I called and called for the neighbors and called, and finally, last week a different contractor, they hired again. Did they hire a different contractor?
I'm not
Anyway,
sure.
they came out and they fixed it finally last week. But I offered the Dominion, what's going to happen with Mr. Bowersock's property and everything? He's put a new Cadillac on his property. And people ask all the time about
And that's a
people
fair
call
question.
my house and ask me those questions about that.
When I take my bike rides, I look for those. And I've been in conversation with the mayor, with Mrs. Odom, and the city is going to address it. It's not going to take us a year to address it. I mean, stop and think about it. We tore 2 houses down. That was a pretty drastic step. And there almost naturally needed to be some kind of a cooling off period. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. He still has all the junk in the back of the property, and that's the one that had 7 vehicles. The last car that he used to drive is now sitting on that lot with the junk on it, and now he has a Cadillac. But,
full stuff already.
yeah. No, those kind of things really affect the quality of life of neighbors, and those are things that I focus on, and I'm in contact with the different departments within the city to deal with them. But junk autos and property maintenance, I mean, they go hand in hand. So I'm excited about all the great things happening in the city. I think we have a wonderful community, and if you have something specific you would like for me to work on, please let me know. See me after this meeting, give me a call me anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may follow up on Councilor Tebben's comments on the Dominion. When they initially started that program, they started in the 5th Ward. And I can assure you, it was a learning curve. What you're getting now is far less impact than what we experienced in the 5th Ward. One, the quality of the grass seed was poor. The concrete contractor that they had subbed to was poor. They've had to go back and replace. Plus the efficiency of relocating the line. So they have learned many lessons by the time they've gotten here. I'm not saying you don't have minor headaches. Any change is a minor headache. But they have listened and have made corrections as they've gone. and I'll give them credit for that. Thank you.
And they have, they continue to try to provide information. Peggy Hora is available if you've got problems getting to contractors. She says to call her, so please do. It's a big project. It's a multi-year project. It's happening all over as they renew their entire infrastructure. So it's important to be done because of the leaks that were in the system. It was a safety issue. I think all of their metal pipe was in trouble. And so this is not just being done because it's a nice thing to do. For the overall safety of the community, this is essential. A couple things I'll remark on. One has to do with state policy. Lima City Council voted several weeks ago in support of Medicaid expansion by the state of Ohio. It's really important that Lima citizens communicate to our elected officials about Medicaid expansion. I have discussed this directly and publicly with Mr. Huffman. I've made it clear that my opinion is that a denial of the Medicaid expansion will not fix health care, nor will approval. But a denial will also deny poor people in our community much needed health care. This is not about fixing health care. This is about providing health care. The system may be broken. The system may need other kinds of improvements. But for the state of Ohio to not provide that is completely irresponsible in my view. And I want to encourage Lima citizens to communicate with the folks we've elected about those needs. It's really important. A second state policy issue has to do with what legislators are considering for changes to the municipal income tax. Under the guise of reform to achieve uniformity, what you've got is a group of special interests who are in fact looking for tax breaks. And after the loss of tangible personal property tax, after the loss of estate tax, after the loss of local government funds, we now have lost $3 million a year because of state cuts. Just the city of Lima has lost $3 million a year. So when we start talking about how do we afford all of these other things, the issue is we've lost money as a result of decisions in Columbus to take money away. And now we've got another one underway. And I would encourage you to be in touch with Mr. Huffman and Mr. Faber and say enough's enough. The municipal income tax is, there are things, and we've been, Steve Cleaves and I have gone through this in some detail with the Municipal League. There are things that the Municipal League is entirely willing to support as uniform changes. But there are other things that truly make it a grab bag of tax breaks for various interests. And I'll give you an example. There is a provision under the current state law for temporary workers. If you, in any jurisdiction with an income tax, work less than 12 days, you don't pay an income tax. 12 days is uniform all across the state of Ohio. Well, under the guise of a new uniformity, they're going to raise that to 20. Now, why go that direction? Why not take it to 5? That'd be uniform too. So there are many things in this proposal that are simply about reducing taxes for some people, not for everybody. And again, I think that our elected officials need to hear from us on that. The last 5 weeks, I've traveled more than I had in any time in my life. I'm about worn out. And we've had a number of trips to DC dealing with EPA, dealing with the tank plant. I think on EPA matters, it's yet to be seen whether we ultimately will get anywhere, either both with our consent decree and with the legislators. So we just have to keep working. With the tank plant, actually I have more hope than not. Yesterday we had a major set of visitors here. A woman in charge of all procurements, all buying for the Army was here. She was, I think, very much impressed. You simply can't go through that plant on the kind of tour that's given and not come away with an absolute sense that this has to be maintained. Unless we want to stop all national security, that's our purpose, then shut it down. But if we truly want to maintain national security, we have to keep the plant in some warm state of production.